Welcome, everyone, and welcome to Millions Missing 2021. And thank you, too, for the warm welcome that everyone has given me over the past month. You have all taught me so much about ME, about your brave and strong journeys managing this terrible disease, and your tremendous passion and dedication to fight so that one day those with ME will have access to passionate and effective care. We're here today because millions are missing from their lives. Millions of dollars are missing from research and education, and millions of medical providers are missing out on proper training so that they can diagnose and effectively treat ME in the best way that they can. These words over the past month have come to hold more meaning for me than I ever could have imagined. After speaking with so many individuals struggling every day because of a disease that is so misunderstood and widely overlooked, what has been crystal clear to me from the start is that we are all in this fight together and you are not alone. This powerful community of people with ME, caregivers, family members, allies, are all working tirelessly, strategically, and differently to affect change. Our ability to tackle ME from different levels, angles, and perspectives, and at the same time support each other and work toward a common goal is what will bring about transformative change. We are all in this fight together, and we will not leave your side.
For those of you who are long haulers, I'm sorry and welcome. We're glad to have you here. Our arms are open. We want to do anything we can to help you understand what's going on with your bodies and to help you avoid making yourselves worse, as many of us did by pushing too hard. Our Stop, Rest, and Pace campaign is the way that we started to reach out to you all to make sure that you did the best things for your body. We didn't have that when we got sick, so we want you to have it. It's so important. And we're glad to have you here with us. Even though we are so sorry that this illness came along and did the things to your life that it's done to ours.
ME is real, your experience is real, and our individual and collective struggles are real. But also equally as real is our connections, our resolve, and how much we're needed as those new to our struggles face their own. It's not easy to know that people with ME who already bear so much would now also have to be at the ready to reach out and say to people with long COVID, we see you, we believe you, we know your struggle, but of course we do. We do it because we needed people to do that for us. And the deep, unjust truth that so many of us did not have anyone do that for us is a harm that can never be undone.
I have tears in my eyes now as I see so many people joining this conversation. And it's just such a relevant topic. You are not alone. I am not alone. You are not alone. We are not alone. But it hasn't always been this way. I spent decades of feeling alone. I felt alone when my ex-mother-in-law told me that she never wants to speak to me again because I'm always tired when she speaks to me. When my ex-husband told me, why are you lying on the floor just to put away the laundry? It can't really be that serious. I felt alone. But don't notice that I said ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law. So we let go of that baggage. But it didn't stop there. After I got diagnosed, my best friend, who's a registered nurse, said to me, go take a Xanax. Chronic fatigue is nothing but a mental health issue. And my best friend, after I got diagnosed, I gave her pamphlets just so she can understand some of what I've been going through. And she threw them in the garbage right in front of me and said, I'm not reading any of that. It's too much to read. So I felt alone. And in fact, I was alone. But we're not alone now. As I'm talking, two more people joined us. And again, it brings tears to my eyes of joy to see that all of us are here today.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Minhas, and as Lori mentioned, I have long COVID. When the team at ME Action asked me to share my story on ME Advocacy Day, I was honored and humbled. It's humbling because I know there are thousands like me who were well and active prior to COVID. Even more humbling is that many of us join alongside countless millions who have suffered with ME long before this pandemic. The idea of millions missing is new to me, and I admit learning to deal with the chronic debilitating symptoms, leaving a career I love, and being okay with being vulnerable, I have felt very overwhelmed. But every time I feel that overwhelming feeling, there was always someone there listening and advising. In effect, I learned that you all who are part of Millions Missing are actually the few who are truly present.
We are not alone is not just about community, which really matters. It's really vital. But we are not alone is also about seeing the problems that we confront as part of a pattern. That we are not alone means we are not the only ones suffering in the way we are suffering. We are part of a system that has systematically disregarded this illness. We are part of a medical and scientific world that has ignored and even disregarded these kinds of this profound against suffering. So we are not alone is about going from me to we and seeing ourselves as part of a movement that can do what we've seen other movements do and that we are in the midst of doing ourselves, which is to transform suffering into power and to go from me to we as part of that process.
I first got sick in 2011 after a severe viral infection, like so many people have talked about here today. And like so many, I struggled to be believed and taken seriously. And we all have different ways of dealing with the tragedy and destruction that this illness can bring. And for me, I turned to community, advocacy, and storytelling. I spent a lot of time in those early days talking to and learning from the elders in our community, the men and women who had gotten sick in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and had fought for decades for research and equality. They fought to be treated like any other person dealing with any other debilitating condition and to get the research and treatment that they needed. And I will never forget interviewing a woman in Incline Village whose husband had gotten sick after the 1984 outbreak there when I was just 2 years old. And she told me about all of the advocacy that she and many others had done in the 80s and in the 90s. And her husband actually unfortunately died in the meantime. And she talked about going to committee after committee, and every time a new issue was raised or a promise was made, they would start a new committee about the new thing. And she described this process of 30 years just kind of going by in committee meetings. And I asked her what went wrong, like what did she think went wrong? And without skipping a beat, she said to me, "We were too nice." And that means many different things. But one of the things to her that this meant was that we had believed in the promises that we were made over and over again. And after they had been broken over and over again, it was in some sense too late, or at least too late for her husband. And as a new member of this community, as a patient who was newly ill, I really took that lesson to heart as a message from the past and the present that we really had to honor the work that had come before and to understand that every year there's people getting sick, but we're not starting from scratch. We're starting on the foundation of a history, and that means a lot of positive things, and it also means a lot of challenging things. And so I kind of came to my advocacy with an idea that I had to sort of carry with me the wisdom and the rage of all of that time lost, not just my 1 or 2 years, but with the 30 and 40 years, and to embody that, because that was the truth of why I got sick, right? Like I didn't have to get sick. Right? And anyone who's a long hauler here today didn't necessarily have to develop long-term illness following a virus. And this has happened because after outbreak, after outbreak, after outbreak, after individual infection, we haven't responded in the way that we needed to.
At Congress at the end of March, there was a subcommittee hearing on long COVID, and it was a long, like 6 hours long. Was quite the long haul to get through. But there, like we heard Dr. Francis Collins from the NIH, John Brooks from CDC, like testify about long COVID. It was really great to see like a bunch of Congress members ask them about ME/CFS and see them forced to kind of respond to that. So I'm glad for all the advocacy work everyone's been doing But I was struck as I kind of listened to the answers and just, day after day, what our team of volunteers is really doing is trying to see how to engage these agencies, the stories they're putting out and what they're saying, how we can push them to do more. But I'm just struck by the theme that really struck out to me from listening to that hearing was just the word wait. Like the constant assurances of like, wait, we've got this. You just need to wait for treatments, wait for answers, wait for a medical system to change, to acknowledge you, wait for hope. Oftentimes couched in the most positive words, but I think the thing we have to recognize that we as advocates, activists who stand up for change need to recognize is that the government officials, our government organizations are often, that's the message we're often going to be told, that we need to wait. And there's something behind that request to wait, which is, I believe, an illusion, a misperception, a fundamental lie, that the problem lies, what's missing, what's broken lies with us. It's your body that has this medical mystery that science can't figure out. And like, sorry about that, but like, wait your turn and eventually something will come around and things will change. And that's not reality. The reality is that what's broken are our institutions. An institution that fundamentally does not produce, a National Institute of Health that does not produce results, outcome, new learning, options, progress that perpetuates discrimination, is not an institution that's working correctly. And so the call to wait is a lie. And I don't want us to believe it. And I think, sometimes it's hard to explain what ME Action is, what we do. We do a bunch of different crazy things, but fundamentally what I wake up every day about thinking about is how to disrupt the expectation of waiting. That's what we do.
When I first got this illness in 1983, I had no one that I knew of who had ever had anything like this happen to them before. I know that there are people in the world that happened to, but no one that my doctors had ever heard of. They had not heard of anything like that happening to anybody. And as I lost everything, including the function of my brain, which was the most painful, I lost my ability to teach physics. I lost my ability to finish my doctorate in physics. I lost so much with no explanation. And that was heartbreaking. When I did receive a diagnosis in 1988, it changed my world. Not only did I know that this illness had a name, a horrible name, nobody likes the name chronic fatigue syndrome for sure, but it had a name, it had a definition, and most of all, there were support groups. I was here in Atlanta and I joined the Atlanta support group, and all around me were people who had the same experience I had. I wasn't alone anymore. Sometimes people ask me why I'm so adamant about our government agencies reaching out and making sure that other African Americans are diagnosed with this disease. Well, one reason is because they told us originally that no African Americans had it and they have that responsibility. But it's more than that. It's that not having a diagnosis leaves you alone. As soon as I had a diagnosis and could join a group, I had people to work with. I had people to talk with. I had people to exchange ideas with.
As it stands right now, Black people with ME, disease that has historically been perceived to be a white woman's disease, struggle to get diagnosed. Now we're adding a significant number of Black COVID long haulers to a healthcare system that is already inherently biased towards us. The COVID-19 pandemic illustrates the intersection of structural racism and health and why we need to address structural racism now. Structural racism is the common denominator and underlying condition fueling disparities in COVID-19 and preventing Black people from being diagnosed with ME. Nevertheless, I remain hopeful that more ME research will be done sooner than later, especially with the growing number of COVID long haulers being added to our community. We are the millions missing. They, the COVID long haulers, are the millions more. How many millions more do we need to stop history from continuing to repeat itself? That being said, research on long COVID should be combined with, not separate from, ME research, as post-viral illnesses have been around for decades, and there will be another after COVID. Combining the research gives all of us, the millions missing and the millions more, the best chance of returning to our old lives. Now, let's keep fighting to make that dream a reality.
This has been quite a momentous year in the UK in many ways, but particularly because of NICE, the national body who are rewriting the influential treatment guidelines for ME. As the video showed, since 2007, the UK has had guidelines in place that recommend graded exercise therapy, in spite of significant evidence showing that this approach harms people with ME. We have campaigned both behind the scenes and through some impressive community actions to get a warning on this guideline before the new one is due to be published. We've wanted to stop the harm immediately, not in another year or another few months' time. And this year we've won. After much pushback from NICE stating that there was no mechanism to add a warning to the current guidelines, they have now done so. The new draft guideline came out last autumn, and it included an explicit statement advising against the use of graded exercise therapy. This means real change is happening. We're hearing from people with ME that medical professionals are changing their tune, and on top of that, we're hearing similar from those with long COVID. But there's a long way to go yet, and we need to make sure that we are reaching out to the health professionals who are still skeptical of these changes, to the researchers who could be making an incredible difference in this field, and most importantly, to the people with ME, like myself and many of the other volunteers here in the UK, to make sure that we remain central to driving this progress. As the saying goes, nothing about us without us.
I am so thrilled to personally tell you that a project years in the works is finally live. ME Action's Chronic Illness Survey Adventure, or the Symptom Cluster Characterization in Complex Chronic Disease Project, is a survey-based study to probe more deeply into ME/CFS, long COVID, POTS, HEDS, and MCAS symptoms. Our survey began by examining the symptoms listed in sets of diagnostic criteria for each of these illnesses. Then we incorporated validated surveys for complex symptoms like pain and fatigue, but we didn't stop there. Next, we recruited clinical partners to help recruit participants and validate their own patients' diagnoses, and partners with lived experience of each of these diseases. Together, we gathered patient-reported symptoms not present in any set of diagnostic criteria. Now we need your help to gather the richest qualitative data on complex chronic disease ever. Let me tell you some of what I've done to ensure that our community can be proud of this study. The work is built around the core understanding that we have a story to tell and that this story is unique and meaningful. Recent studies in long COVID show that patient-reported symptoms are richer, more numerous, and more complete than those provided by their clinicians. We will gain new insights by using validated instruments, clinician-designed questions, and those symptoms reported by the patients alone. Lived experience could make all the difference in understanding ME and beyond.
We are in the fight of our lives. We know that. And more people are coming into our community. And one of the things that's happened in the last year is that ME Action has given me the freedom to create this camp called ME Action Activist Camp. And I was so excited when I was given this opportunity because it's like my fantasy of like workshop curricula development with being like this sassy activist and putting it all together. And we had our very first ME Action Activist Camp. And I am proud to say that we graduated 23 new ME Action Activist campers. And it was amazing. I feel super bonded. And you know, we really looked at it from an intersectional approach. We brought in people from the HIV community, people living with HIV, people from the LGBTQ community, and we all learned from each other and shared so that we could increase our skills and knowledge so that we could speak truth to power. You know, somebody earlier said, you know, nothing about us without us. But one of the things that I try to remember in my activism is that my silence could equal my death and that knowledge equals power. So the more that I learn and the more that I can learn from my colleagues and my peers, the better I can fight, not only for my life, but for everybody else's life in the world who's impacted by this disease.
I can see tangible benefits from this press work, whether it's a doctor expressing gratitude for information on how to treat ME, or a new article from a reporter our team cultivated. Each email I send to a journalist or healthcare provider from around the world, it's a prayer that I will help open a mind to the realities of this trap, this paradox. Long COVID is new, and it isn't. We have been the millions missing. They are the millions more. We know their stories because they're our stories. Whether triggered by coronavirus, a car crash, or just out of the blue, it's the same story of half existence. It's the story of ME. I hope that each of these newly bewildered by their bodies people find their home, their fort to fight from. I hope they find ME Action because sadly, most of them belong here. Just like us, the millions more need to find a safe space to be heard, to be believed, to be encouraged.
The AIDS pandemic and HIV/AIDS activists forced the medical and research sectors to open up their decision-making, their resources, and their minds to intense, irreplaceable involvement of people living with HIV and allies as experts in their lives and needs. So let me be specific about some of this. I'm not living with HIV, but I've been an HIV activist for a long time. When I was 23 years old, which was a long time ago, I served alongside researchers at the NIH-funded International AIDS Clinical Trials Group Network as a member of their community constituency group, the CCG. The CCG had 2 of our members, people living with HIV, on the executive committee of the AIDS Clinical Trials Group, and we sat on every protocol team for every clinical trial with full voting privileges. Later, I led trainings on HIV prevention research advocacy, after which we brought everyone involved to the meetings of the HIV Prevention Trials Network to push forward on our equity and justice-fueled demands. As a result, I was appointed to the strategic working group of the NIH's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, run by Tony Fauci, where we had the power to approve or deny funding for international clinical trials with budgets over $25 million. But when it comes to ME, we have NIH hiding the names of grant reviewers.
I didn't have to get sick, right? Anyone who's a long hauler here today didn't necessarily have to develop long-term illness following a virus. And this has happened because after outbreak, after outbreak, after outbreak, after individual infection, we haven't responded in the way that we needed to. And so her comment to me blew me away a bit because I think I never thought about the possibility that one could be too nice, too patient, or too trusting. But I learned from her, and I also learned from AIDS activists and the legacy of their movement, that when you have a gap in understanding and in care, and what is really a medical system failure of the scope that we have experienced, you need more than advocacy, you need mass activism. And that has always been a challenge for a community of profoundly ill people, and especially in this year of the pandemic. But I want to say to anyone here who's new, meaning maybe they joined our community in the last 2 years or is a long COVID patient, I wanted to sort of be here as the co-founder to share the inspiration that was at the heart of ME Action's founding. And that's the truth that, alone in our lives, we achieve miracles every day. And to just live with this illness and to still find ways to live a life of meaning and joy and just sometimes just get through the day is every day an heroic act. And I saw the profound power people had found in themselves to do that, even though maybe society doesn't always perceive that as power. We may not always experience it as power, but it is. And I realized that as much as we can do alone, together, we can do incredible things if we band together and fight. And so the message I want to share today is actually the first Facebook tile we shared on Facebook in 2015 when we first launched, and we had like 2 followers, which was, we have to become the strength of our numbers. And I think that that's a message that has carried us through, but is even more relevant today. And now that there are millions more missing due to long COVID.